The dust sheet had been on the car for 8 years. It was a good dust sheet, fitted, breathable, the kind that cost more than most people spent on furniture and that was purchased with the specific intention of protecting something indefinitely. It had done its job without complaint. Beneath it, the car had waited with the particular patience of things that have no choice about waiting, present, specific, unchanged. The garage that held it was attached to a house in the Connecticut hills that had been built in 1987 by a man who had wanted, above everything else, a garage large enough for the cars he intended to own. He had achieved this. The garage held 6 bays. 5 of them contained vehicles covered in matching dust sheets, a discipline of concealment that suggested their owner preferred to think about them only when she had specifically decided to. The 6th bay held the Le Mans car. Victoria Harmon was 38 years old and ran Harmon Precision Engineering, a company her father had founded in 1989 and that she had been, in various capacities, working in since she was 16. She had inherited it at 30, along with the house, the garage, the cars, and the particular weight that comes with inheriting not just property but identity. The understanding that the thing you have been given was someone else's entire life, and that carrying it forward is both a privilege and a debt you can never fully repay. Her father, James Harmon, had been a racing man, not a driver. He had never had the specific recklessness that driving required. He was an engineer, and his relationship with racing was the relationship of someone who understood the machines from the inside out and loved them for precisely that reason. He had sponsored a Le Mans entry 3 times. The 3rd time, in 2016, his car, a prototype he had spent 4 years developing through Harmon Precision, had qualified for the 24 hours. It had run for 6 hours and 42 minutes before the accident. James Harmon had died 18 months after the race, not from anything related to it. His heart, which had been reliable for 63 years, had decided without warning that it was finished. He died in his office on a Tuesday morning with the preliminary drawings for a 4th Le Mans entry on his desk. Victoria had covered the crashed car the day after his funeral. She had not uncovered it since. She had tried, twice, to have it restored. The first attempt, 18 months after her father's death, had brought a restoration firm from Indianapolis with a strong reputation in historic racing vehicles. They had assessed the car for 3 days, produced a preliminary report, and quoted $340,000 for a full restoration to race-ready condition. They had also noted, in the 2nd paragraph of their preliminary findings, that the primary structural damage to the monocoque chassis suggested an impact load that exceeded what the telemetry data from the race had indicated, which implied either a data recording fault or a secondary impact that had not been captured. They recommended further forensic assessment before proceeding. Victoria had read the 2nd paragraph 3 times. Then she had paid their assessment fee and asked them to leave. The 2nd attempt, 2 years later, had brought a Formula Racing engineer from the UK, a man with 2 World Championship seasons on his resume and a reputation for being able to read a damaged car the way other people read a damaged document. He had spent 6 days in the garage. He had accessed the chassis data, the engine logs, the telemetry fragments. He had produced 40 pages of technical analysis. On the last page, in the careful language of someone who understood the implications of what he was writing, he had noted that the failure pattern in the car's left front suspension assembly was inconsistent with the accident as officially recorded, that the component showed stress fracture characteristics that predated the impact, that in his professional opinion the suspension had been compromised before the car reached the accident point. He had asked Victoria whether this finding changed anything about how she wanted to proceed. She had paid his fee and asked him to leave. The 40 pages were in a locked drawer in her office. She had not opened the drawer since the day she put them in it. She had not attempted a 3rd restoration. Instead, in September of the year this story begins, she had hired a detailing contractor to clean and maintain the other 5 vehicles in the garage. Routine maintenance. Practical necessity. The cars needed attention even if she was not ready to drive them. The contractor's name, according to the agency paperwork, was Daniel Reeves. He had been in business for 3 years. His reviews were consistent, thorough, quiet, reliable. He worked alone. He asked for access and time and nothing else. He arrived on a Tuesday at 7:30 in the morning. Daniel Reeves was 46 years old and lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Milford, Connecticut, with his daughter Iris, who was 8, who had her mother's red hair and her father's habit of noticing things other people walked past. He drove a 2011 Transit van with his company name on the side in modest lettering, Reeves Detailing, and carried his equipment in a way that communicated the organization of someone for whom disorder was not merely inconvenient, but actively uncomfortable. Every product in its place, every tool in its designated position. A system developed over years of working alone and refined to the point where he could locate anything he needed in complete darkness. Iris came with him on school holidays. She sat in the passenger seat and read, or drew, or asked questions about whatever they were passing. Not the casual questions of a child filling silence, but the specific questions of a child who actually wanted to know the answers. She had her mother's directness and her father's precision, and the combination produced a child who could, on a good day, ask a question that stopped her father mid-sentence and made him think about something he had not thought about in years. She had found the pit pass 2 months ago. It was in the bottom drawer of her father's desk, in a small plastic sleeve, tucked beneath a folder of business documents she had been searching through for a permission slip he'd said he'd already signed. The pass was laminated, worn at the edges, the credential photograph slightly faded. Her father's face, younger, looking at the camera with the focused expression of someone who was not there to have his photograph taken, but understood it was a requirement. The pass read, 24 Heures du Mans, 2016. Pit crew access. Lead engineer, Daniel Reeves. She had not known her father had been to Le Mans. She had not known he had been a lead engineer on anything. She knew he detailed cars for a living, and that he was good at it, and that he worked carefully and alone, and that he kept his tools in a system so precise she had once spent 20 minutes studying it because it seemed to her like a language she didn't yet speak. She had put the pass back in the sleeve and the sleeve back in the drawer. She had not asked him about it. She was waiting for the right moment. She did not know when it would be. She knew she would recognize it. She carried the pass with her in the front pocket of her school bag. Not because she had decided to, because one morning she had put it there without quite choosing to and had not moved it since. Daniel had worked as a motorsport engineer for 14 years. He had come to it through mechanical engineering, through a specific gift for understanding dynamic systems under load, the behavior of components at the edge of their tolerance, the point at which a structure that appears sound begins to carry a compromise it will eventually be unable to hold. He had worked his way through Formula 3, Formula 2, a season in DTM, 3 years with a World Endurance Championship team. He had been good, not famous. Engineers in motorsport are rarely famous, but known among the people who mattered in the paddock as someone you wanted in your pit when the margin between winning and catastrophic failure was the width of a calculation. In 2014, he had joined the team running the Harmon Precision Le Mans prototype, James Harmon's project, the 4th year of its development, the year it finally qualified. In 2015, running preparation for the 2016 race, Daniel had identified a stress fatigue issue in the left front suspension assembly. He had flagged it twice in technical reports. The team's technical director, a man named Graham Cole, 61, experienced, confident in the way that certain experienced people become confident in a manner that is indistinguishable from certainty, had reviewed the reports and determined the variance was within acceptable parameters. Daniel had not agreed. He had said so, twice. The second time, Graham Cole had looked at him across a conference table and said, with the precision of a man who had been doing this for 30 years, "Daniel, I have seen this pattern on 4 different cars in 20 years. It does not present the risk you're describing. We are proceeding." They had proceeded. On the 19th lap of the 2016 24 Hours of Le Mans, at the Porsche curves, the left front suspension of the Harmon precision prototype had failed. The driver, a man named Sebastian Averill, 32 years old, one of the most technically gifted endurance drivers of his generation, had managed the resulting loss of control with a skill that the stewards later described in the accident report as exceptional. He had kept the car out of the barriers long enough to bleed speed and had taken a controlled impact into the gravel trap rather than a direct strike at race speed. He had walked away. The car had not walked away. The impact had destroyed the left side of the monocoque, deformed the front subframe, and driven the left wheel assembly back through the footwell at an angle that would have been unsurvivable at 10 miles per hour more. Daniel had been at the pit wall when it happened. He had watched the telemetry spike and flatline and watched Sebastian's car disappear from the timing screens and stood very still while the safety car deployed and the radio came alive with voices he was not fully hearing because he was running. In his head, the calculation he had run twice before and been told was wrong. It was not wrong. He had left the team that night. He had driven to the ferry at Calais, taken the crossing to Dover, driven to his apartment in London, and sat at his kitchen table until morning. His wife, Elena, had not asked him what had happened. She had made coffee and sat across from him and been present in the specific way she had always been present, completely, without demand. Iris had been born the following year. Elena had died 2 years after that. A cancer that moved faster than anyone expected, that gave them 14 months from diagnosis and took her on a Thursday morning in spring with a thoroughness that left no space for the particular kind of disbelief that requires evidence to become real. Daniel had stopped engineering the day he left Le Mans. He had not gone back. He built the detailing business slowly, carefully, from almost nothing. He was good at it in the way he was good at everything that required attention and patience and the willingness to work alone without recognition. The cars he detailed were always cleaner than when he found them. He never needed to be told twice. He had not told Iris about Le Mans. He had not told her about the suspension report, or Graham Cole, or the 44th lap when the timing screen went blank. He had not told her because she was 8 years old, and because he was not certain there was a version of the telling that served her rather than him. He thought about it, though, more recently, more often. He arrived at Victoria Harmon's garage on a Tuesday at 7:30 in the morning, and was met by a property manager named Linda, who showed him the keypad code and the equipment storage area and pointed out which bays he was to service. 5 vehicles. The 6th bay, she gestured toward it without elaborating, was not to be disturbed. Daniel nodded. He began with Bay 2. He worked methodically through the morning. The cars were well maintained, stored correctly, minimal dust accumulation, no moisture damage. He worked with the quiet efficiency that was the primary quality his clients mentioned in reviews, the sense that the work was being done by someone who understood what he was doing and required no supervision. At noon, he reached Bay 5, the bay adjacent to the 6th. He was cleaning along the floor line at the edge of Bay 5 when his cloth caught the corner of the dust sheet on the car in Bay 6. It moved 2 inches. He looked at what the 2 inches revealed. The wheel arch. Carbon fiber, damaged. The specific deformation pattern of an impact at the Porsche curves on the 19th lap of the 2016 24 Hours of Le Mans. Daniel Reeves stopped moving. He was still for 11 seconds. Then he reached out and pulled the dust sheet back. The car was as he remembered it, and worse than he remembered it simultaneously. In his memory, it was an accident site. The immediate aftermath, the emotion of the moment distorting the detail. In front of him now it was a technical object, and 8 years of accumulated distance meant he could see it with a precision the original moment had not allowed. The left side monocoque damage was severe but contained. Sebastian's control had limited the impact to one vector rather than the multiple impact sequence that a less skilled driver would have produced. The right side was structurally intact. The engine cover was undamaged. The rear diffuser was perfect. What he had built, what the team had built over 4 years, what James Harmon had funded and believed in and flown to Le Mans 3 consecutive years to watch, was visible beneath the damage. The fundamental architecture. The thinking that had gone into the geometry, the weight distribution, the integration of the aerodynamic package with the mechanical platform. It was good work. It had always been good work. He looked at the left front wheel assembly, at the suspension components, at the specific location where the failure had initiated. He crouched down and looked at it from the angle he had described in his report in 2015. From this angle, with 8 years of vindication behind him, the fatigue pattern in the upright was visible even now, even in the damaged state, even to someone who wasn't specifically looking for it. He stayed crouched for a long time. He heard footsteps behind him. Victoria Harmon had come to check on the progress at noon. She found her property manager standing at the entrance to Bay 6 with an expression of someone who was uncertain whether a rule had been broken or something more complicated was happening. She found the detailing contractor crouched beside her father's crashed Le Mans car, with the dust sheet pulled back and his hand resting on the damaged monocoque with the particular quality of contact that is not examination, but something more personal. "Mr. Reeves," she said. He stood. He turned. She looked at his face. She had met many people in the 8 years since her father's death who had known him in various capacities: business, engineering, racing. She recognized something in this man's face that she had seen in some of those people and not in others. The specific expression of someone for whom this car was not an object, but a chapter. "I apologize," he said. "The sheet caught when I was cleaning the adjacent bay. I should have stopped there." "You should have," she said. He made no move to replace the sheet. She made no move to replace it herself. They both looked at the car. "You know this car?" she said. It was not a question. A pause, long enough to be its own answer. "I was the lead pit engineer," he said. 2014 to 2016. Victoria's expression did not change dramatically. It changed the way expressions change when a fact arrives that rearranges other facts. A small internal adjustment whose full consequence would take time to become clear. "You were there when it crashed," she said. "Yes. Why are you detailing cars in my garage?" Daniel looked at the Le Mans car, at the left front wheel assembly, at the location where the suspension had failed on the 19th lap of the race he had spent 2 years preparing for and 2 years warning about. "Because," he said slowly, "I left the industry the night of the accident, and I needed work I could do with my hands, and I turned out to be good at this." He paused. "I didn't know the car was here. I knew it had been brought back from France, but I never knew where it went." Victoria studied him. "The UK engineer," she said, 2 years ago. His report mentioned a pre-existing failure in the suspension. "I wrote 2 reports in 2015 identifying that failure," Daniel said. "I was told the variance was within acceptable parameters." "By whom?" "Graham Cole." Victoria was very still. "Graham Cole has been dead for 3 years," she said. "I know." Another silence. The garage was very quiet. Outside, somewhere down the hill, A bird was doing something sustained and cheerful that was completely indifferent to the conversation happening in the garage. "Mr. Reeves," Victoria said finally, "can you rebuild this car?" Daniel looked at the monocoque damage, at the subframe deformation, at the engine, which was almost certainly salvageable, at the right side of the car, which was perfect. He ran the assessment the way he had always run assessments, quickly, completely, the calculation happening behind his eyes while his face showed nothing. "Yes," he said. "How long?" "Properly, 6 months. The monocoque needs specialist carbon repair. There are 2 facilities in Europe that can do it to race standard. The subframe can be fabricated here if I have access to the right equipment. The suspension components need to be rebuilt from scratch to the correct specification, which means I need the original design files." "My father kept everything," Victoria said. "Then 6 months," Daniel said. "Possibly 5. Victoria looked at the car for a long time. 8 years of the dust sheet, 3 restoration attempts that had not resulted in a single bolt being turned, the 40-page report in the locked drawer, the drawing for the 4th Le Mans entry on her father's desk when he died. "Why would you do this?" she said. "After 8 years, after leaving the industry, why would you come back to this car?" Daniel looked at the left front wheel assembly. At the upright he had described in a report in 2015 in the language as precise as he could make it. At the answer to a question he had spent 8 years not being able to show anyone. "Because I have been right about this car for 8 years," he said quietly, "and no one who needed to know has ever seen the evidence." He looked at Victoria. "Your father deserved a car that ran. Sebastian deserved a suspension that held. I would like to build them both something I should have been allowed to build in 2015. Victoria Harmon looked at the man standing beside her father's crashed Le Mans car in work clothes with clean hands and the expression of someone who had been carrying something for 8 years and was finally standing in the place where it could be set down. "Start Monday," she said. The design files were in the archive room adjacent to James Harmon's office. 3 cabinets of engineering drawings, CAD printouts, calculation sheets, test data, development logs going back to 2012. Daniel spent the first day reading them. He read the way he read everything technical, completely, in order, without skipping, because the thing that mattered was almost never in the section you expected it to be in. By the end of the first day, he understood the car's architecture better than he had understood it in 2016, when time pressure and team politics had compressed his access to the fundamental thinking. James Harmon had been a good engineer. The basic platform was sound. The decisions that had led to the suspension failure were not in the original design. They had accumulated over the development cycle as compromises were made to weight targets, and component sourcing was adjusted to meet budget. The failure point was not a design error. It was the consequence of a series of small decisions that had individually been defensible and collectively had been wrong. Daniel wrote a full forensic analysis on the second day. Not for anyone specifically, because the analysis needed to exist, because Sebastian Avril deserved to have someone write down precisely what had happened and why, and confirm in the language of engineering that it had not been his fault and had not been inevitable. He sent a copy to Sebastian's email address, which he found through a racing contact he had not spoken to in 4 years. He included a brief covering note. He did not ask for a response. Sebastian replied within 2 hours. The reply was 4 sentences. The last one read, "I always knew it wasn't the car. Thank you for telling me what it was." Daniel printed the email. He put it in his jacket pocket. He went back to work. Victoria came to the garage every morning, not to supervise, to be present. She sat at a workbench with her laptop and managed her company's work while Daniel worked on the car, and they developed the specific understanding of two people who are sharing a space for a serious purpose. Minimal conversation, mutual awareness. The occasional exchange that was direct and substantive and efficiently concluded. On the third week, she brought him a document from the locked drawer in her office. "The 40-page report," she said. "I thought you should have it." He read it that evening. The UK engineer had reached the same conclusion he had reached. Different methodology, same finding. He had been right in 2015, and a second independent engineer had confirmed it in 2022. And Graham Cole had been dead for 3 years, and none of it changed what had happened on the 19th lap. What it changed was something else, something less tangible and more important. The confirmation that the knowledge had been correct, that the 2 reports he had filed and been told to set aside had been describing a real thing, a real risk, a real eventual failure, was not satisfaction. It was closer to the specific relief of a weight being set down, even though you have been carrying it long enough that the absence of it feels unfamiliar. He folded the document and put it with Sebastian's email. Iris came on Saturdays. She had been coming to work with him since she was 5, on the days when alternatives were unavailable, and she had long since developed the skill of being present in a workspace without disrupting it. She brought her school bag. She sat at the secondary workbench. She did homework or drew or read, and she watched her father work with the sustained attention of someone filing information for later use. The Le Mans car changed the quality of her watching. She had seen her father work on many cars, the routine detailing work, the occasional mechanical assist, the careful attention he brought to everything. She had never seen him work like this. The difference was not in the speed or the technique. It was in his relationship to what he was doing. He worked on the other cars the way a skilled person works on something they understand well. He worked on the Le Mans car the way a person works on something that matters to them in a way they have not allowed themselves to acknowledge. She noticed this. She did not say anything. She kept the pit pass in her school bag and waited for the right moment, which she was still learning to recognize. The monocoque repair took 6 weeks. Daniel had arranged for the damaged sections to be handled by a carbon fiber specialist in Pennsylvania, one of 2 facilities in America capable of structural repair to race standard specification, and had driven the components himself and returned to collect them personally when the work was done. The repair was invisible to the naked eye and transparent under ultrasonic imaging, which was the only standard that mattered. The subframe fabrication he did himself, in a workshop space that Victoria had arranged at Harmon Precision's main facility. He worked from the original drawings, making one modification, a reinforcement at the left front pickup point that increased the assembly's fatigue margin by 37% at race loads. The modification added 340 grams to the car's weight. He documented it in full and asked Victoria to approve it. She read his documentation. She approved it without amendment. "My father would have approved it too," she said. "I think he would have approved it in 2015 if someone had explained it to him directly," Daniel said. "I'm not sure I did that as well as I could have." Victoria looked at him. "You filed 2 reports." "Reports aren't always the same as explanations," he said. "I was 28 years old, and I believed that correct data was sufficient. I've learned that it isn't always." She was quiet for a moment. "You were 28 and you were right." "Yes," he said. "And Sebastian was in the gravel trap on lap 19. She had no answer for this. He had not offered it as something that required one. It was simply the weight of the thing stated plainly by the person who had been carrying it. The suspension rebuild took 3 weeks. Daniel fabricated each component to the original specification and then beyond it, not beyond the rules, but to the full potential the original design had contained before the development compromises had reduced it. He worked from the original calculations, extending them in the directions James Harmon's team had not had time or budget to pursue. The engine had been dormant for 8 years, but was fundamentally intact. 4 weeks of careful rebuilding, new gaskets, new seals, refreshed fuel system, new electrics. Daniel worked on it with the specific patience of someone who is not in a hurry, because the thing being rebuilt is worth the time it takes. On a Thursday evening in the 5th month, he turned the engine over on the bench. It ran on the 2nd attempt. Victoria was in the garage. She heard it from the office doorway. She came to stand at the entrance to Bay 6 and looked at the engine running on the bench and said nothing for a long time. "That's the sound," she said finally. "What sound?" She looked at him. "My father described it in his letters to me. When it first ran in 2014, he wrote me a letter. He still wrote letters, and tried to describe the sound the engine made. He said it was the sound of something that had been thought about for a very long time, finally doing what it was designed to do." She paused. I didn't know what he meant until right now. Daniel looked at the running engine. At 8 years of the thing it had been designed to do, waiting. "I think he was right," he said. The car was complete on a Saturday morning in April. Daniel had been in the garage since 6 a.m. doing the final checks. Torque values, fluid levels, electrical continuity, brake bias. The work of someone who was not going to hand this car over without being certain that every number was correct and every system was right, and that the left front suspension assembly would hold at race loads for as long as anyone would ever ask it to. Iris had come with him. She sat at the workbench with her school bag and watched her father work through the final checklist with the expression she used when she was deciding whether the right moment had arrived. She had been deciding for 5 months. Victoria arrived at 8:30. She stood in the bay entrance and looked at the car, fully assembled, correctly proportioned, the left side monocoque repaired to invisibility, the bodywork restored to the original livery by a specialist Victoria had arranged independently, the Harmon Precision logo on the flanks exactly as it had appeared in 2016. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then she looked at Daniel. "Is it ready?" "It's ready," he said. She walked slowly around it. She ran her hand along the rear wing, the roofline, the repaired left quarter. She crouched and looked at the left front suspension assembly. At the upright, Daniel had rebuilt to the specification his 2015 report had described. At the fabricated subframe with its 37% increased fatigue margin. At the work of a man who had been right about this for 8 years, and had finally been allowed to build the thing he had always known it should be. She stood up. "My father would have wanted to drive it," she said. "I know," Daniel said. "He never got to hear it run properly." "No." She was quiet. "He would have liked you," she said. "He liked people who were right about things, even when it was inconvenient." Daniel said nothing. He looked at the car and thought about James Harmon, whom he had met 4 times and who had shaken his hand at the end of the 2014 test season and said, in the direct way of someone who did not give compliments casually, "Good work, Daniel. Good work." It was the last thing James Harmon had said to him directly. He thought about what it would have meant to show him this, the rebuilt car, the corrected suspension, the engine running with the sound his daughter had described from a letter. He thought about the drawings for the 4th Le Mans entry that had been on his desk when he died. He thought about the debt that gets carried when you are right about something and no one listens, and the consequence falls anyway, and you spend 8 years wondering what you could have done differently. He had not done anything differently. He had been 28 and correct and overruled. The debt was not his to carry. He had been carrying it anyway. He was ready to set it down. "I'd like to start it," he said. "If that's all right." Victoria stepped back. "Please," she said. He got in. The cockpit was tight. It was a racing car, not a road car, built to hold a driver and nothing else. And he had not sat in a racing car's cockpit since 2016. The feeling of it was a physical memory, not a mental one. The specific pressure of the harness, the angle of the steering wheel, the view forward through the windscreen that was different from every other view he had known in automotive work, because it was the view of something pointing at a horizon with intention. He ran the startup sequence. Fuel pump, ignition, oil pressure. He did each step without reference to a procedure because the procedure was in his hands. He pressed the starter. The engine caught on the first rotation. The sound it produced in the enclosed garage was enormous and immediate and completely itself. Low and serious and purposeful, 600 horsepower running at idle. The car vibrating around him with the specific quality of something that has been built to move fast and is currently exercising patience. Outside the car, Victoria Harmon put her hand over her mouth. She had heard the engine on the bench. This was different. The engine in the car, in the assembled, correct, complete car, was a different sound. It was the sound her father had described in his letter in 2014, the first time the prototype had run. It was the sound of something thought about for a long time doing what it was designed to do. She was crying. She had not planned to cry. She was the kind of person who managed her own emotions with the same efficiency she managed everything else, and she found herself crying in her father's garage in front of a detailing contractor and a child. And she did not stop because there was nothing to be done about it, and because, in some way she had not anticipated, it felt like the right response to the moment. Iris had put down her pencil. She was standing now at the edge of the bay, looking at her father in the car, and at the woman crying, and at the car itself. The beautiful, serious, rebuilt car, running in the morning light with the patience of something that has been waiting a very long time. She reached into her school bag. She took out the pit pass. She walked to the driver's door of the car. Daniel looked down at her. He cut the engine. The garage went quiet, the specific quiet after a sound that large, a quiet that has texture. Iris held up the pit pass. He looked at it. At his own face, younger, in the credential photograph. At the words, Lead Engineer, Daniel Reeves, Le Mans 2016. I found it 2 months ago, she said. I've been waiting to ask you about it. He looked at his daughter. At the pass in her small hand. At the car beside them. Why did you wait? He said. Because, she said, with the precision of someone who had thought about this carefully, I wanted to ask you when you were somewhere that made the answer make sense. He was quiet for a moment. Then he got out of the car. He crouched down so he was at her level. Ask me, he said. She looked at the pass, then at him, then at the car. Were you here? She said. When it crashed. Yes. Was it your fault? He looked at his daughter, this 8-year-old who had carried a pit pass for 2 months and waited for the right moment and chosen this one, this specific morning, in this specific garage, with the engine just run and the car just built, and the 8 years of the weight of it finally ready to be set down. No, he said, it wasn't my fault. She nodded slowly, the nod of someone receiving a confirmation they had suspected but needed to hear. Good, she said. She held out the pass. He took it. He looked at it for a moment. Then he leaned past her and set it on the dashboard of the Le Mans car. His face, younger, looking up from the credential photograph at the car he had spent 8 years owing an apology and 5 months making right. He stood up. Come here, he said. Iris came. He lifted her and she sat on the sill of the car's door and looked into the cockpit, at the instrument cluster, the harness, the steering wheel. This is what you built? She said. "This is what I rebuilt," he said. "There's a difference." She thought about this. "What's the difference?" "Building something is starting from nothing," he said. "Rebuilding something is starting from what went wrong and making it what it should have been." Iris looked at the car, at the pit pass on the dashboard, at her father beside her. "I think I like rebuilding better," she said. Daniel looked at his daughter sitting in the door of the Le Mans car in the morning light in a garage in Connecticut, in the specific posture of a child who is completely at home somewhere she has never been before. "So do I," he said. Sebastian Averill drove the car on a private test day at Lime Rock Park 3 weeks later. Victoria had suggested it. Daniel had arranged it. Sebastian had agreed in one sentence in a reply email that said, "Tell me when and where." He arrived alone. He walked to the car without speaking to anyone and stood beside it for a while in the way that certain drivers stand beside cars, not looking at them from the outside but locating themselves in relation to them, finding the specific geometry of the thing. Then he looked at Daniel. "You built the suspension to your original spec," he said. "Yes, 37% higher fatigue margin at race loads. You read the documentation." "Twice," Sebastian said. He extended his hand. "Thank you." Daniel shook it. He had rehearsed nothing for this moment and found, when it arrived, that nothing was required. Sebastian drove 12 laps. He came back in on the 12th and sat in the car for a moment after the engine was cut, in the specific stillness of a driver at the end of something that has been a long time coming. Then he got out and came to stand beside Daniel. "It drives exactly as it should have," he said. "In 2016, in the race, I felt something wrong in that corner from lap 12. I reported it. I was told the telemetry was clean." "The telemetry was reading the correct data," Daniel said. "The fault was in what the correct data meant to someone who knew about the suspension report and someone who didn't." Sebastian was quiet. 8 years, he said. 8 years, Daniel said. They stood beside the car in the October light and let the 8 years sit between them with the specific weight of things that cannot be undone but can be, in some partial and imperfect way, addressed. Iris was at the trackside with Victoria. She had her notebook. She had written down Sebastian's lap times, which she had been reading from the timing screen with a focus that suggested she was doing something more than recording numbers. Victoria came to stand beside Daniel as Sebastian walked back to his car. "What happens to the car now?" Daniel asked. "It stays in the garage," Victoria said, "where it belongs." She paused. "My father wanted to run it a 4th time, at Le Mans. I know. The entry deadline for next year is in January." She looked at the car. "Harmon Precision still has a racing division. It's been dormant. I've been thinking about whether to reactivate it." Daniel looked at the car. At the Harmon Precision logo on the flanks. At the left front suspension assembly holding the geometry he had described in a report in 2015 and built correctly, finally, in this year. "You'd need an engineer," he said. "I know," Victoria said. He was quiet for a moment. Iris appeared at his elbow. She had her notebook open. She showed him her timing data. 12 laps, each time recorded. A small graph she had sketched showing the lap time progression as Sebastian found the car's rhythm. "He got faster every lap until lap 9, she said. Then he held it constant. Why did he stop getting faster?" "Because he found the limit," Daniel said. "That's what lap 9 means. He found exactly what the car can do and held it there." Iris looked at the graph. "How do you know when you found the limit?" Daniel looked at the car. At the pit pass on the dashboard visible through the windscreen. At his daughter beside him with her notebook and her precise questions and her habit of waiting for the right moment. "You've been right up to the edge of what's possible," he said. "And you're still going." Iris wrote this down. She drew a small symbol beside it, her own notation, the one she used for things that were important enough to remember. Then she closed the notebook, put it in her school bag, and took her father's hand. They walked back to the car together in the October light, the man who had been right about something for 8 years, and the daughter who had waited for the right moment and chosen it perfectly, both of them moving toward something that was not quite the same as what had been lost, and was, for that reason, entirely its own. The Harmon Precision Racing Division reactivated in November. Daniel Reeves was named lead engineer. The entry for the following year's 24 Hours of Le Mans was submitted in January. Iris, when told, opened her notebook to the page with the pit pass drawing she had made the week she found it in the drawer. She wrote one line beneath it: "Dad's going back." Then she drew the symbol she used for things that had completed their waiting. Then she closed the notebook and went to help make dinner. Because some things, once they are right, do not need anything more said about them. They simply need to be allowed to run.